Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. We want to remind you the best content here. It shows up over there at usdailyreview.com. New content, great information, new stuff added every single day. Hundreds of articles added every month. Make sure you check it out. All right, another thing I want you to check out is my good friend Herman Kahn. He is one of our contributors. He is on frequently here on The Price of Business. He's a Lone Star lawyer, and one of the things he likes to do is bring in businesses that are out there. I said Herman, didn't I?
You did.
You know, I've
Herman
done
Kahn
that before.
is a famous
The Economist, yeah.
People mix that up sometimes.
Yeah, he's a great economist, too. But anyway, Howard.
Howard
Kahn. And, think of Wrath of Khan. No, don't think that. Yeah, you had to have watched that movie.
Of course, I'm a Star Trek fan.
Absolutely, me too. So I knew I liked you. So Howard Kahn, he's extraordinary. He's a regular contributor here on The Price of Business. He's got an interesting legal practice that I want him to talk about before he introduces our guest today.
Outstanding. Well, I'm a boutique custom counsel firm. We take unique situations and through client representation and customize our representation just for them, just for their specific problem that they have. Okay,
very good. And today you've brought a guest on. Why don't you go ahead and introduce him today?
His name is Lucian Bukowski with Jones Lang LaSalle Real Estate Company.
Interesting. Lucian, welcome to the program.
Thank you. That's a mouthful.
That is a mouthful. Well, kind of give us your elevator speech real quick.
I represent tenants or users of office space primarily. We also work with industrial space, but much like Howard represents his clients in his legal practice because he knows his area of expertise, we represent tenants. We understand the market dynamics, how transactions get done, what needs to be included, what needs to be left out, and so we're leveling the playing field between a user of office or industrial space and a professional landlord.
Interesting. Howard, you got a question?
Yes, sure. Who do you normally represent?
I represent anybody from a small law firm that might have 10 employees in the office to a large energy company that has 500 or 600 employees in a given office building, and everybody in between.
Well, now, but I think you said it earlier that you exclusively represent just tenants. You do not represent landlords.
That's correct.
Why is that?
Representing both sides of a transaction presents conflict of interest. And so, there are a lot of people that provide professional services to landlords, but my focus is strictly on the end user, the tenant or buyer of an asset.
Yeah, I'm interested because, and I've heard others allude to this type of situation. But to me, I would think it's only a conflict of interest if you were representing both the tenant and the landlord on the same case. So other than that, I don't see how it could be a conflict. Of course, I'm not an attorney, nor have I played one on TV. But I don't know how there's a conflict.
Good observation. The only problem is that we don't control where our tenants go. So my clients might be looking at a building downtown. They might be looking at a building in the Galleria or building in West Chase.
And guess what? You had a conflict with that representing a tenant before with that building they went to or something like that.
That's right. So if I had a listing, for example, in West Chase between on Beltway 8 between Westheimer and Richmond, and I had a client say, hey, look, we need 10,000 feet out there. My job is really to expose them to the market, to show what options they have available that meet their needs. And one listing creates conflict. It only takes one. So in order to remain as conflict-free as possible, we just stay away from that side of the business and focus strictly on the user.
Yeah, interesting. Howard?
Yeah, since you represent only tenants, what do your clients look for when they're planning on leasing a space?
Good question, and it's kind of like buying a car. It depends on what their personal preferences are, their corporate preferences are. Some are looking for the best value, the least expensive rate. Some are looking for a combination of good security, good parking, good location, good amenity base, so quality work environment where they can successfully recruit and retain good employees. Others are looking for a balance between the two, and then you also have people who are looking for a lot of flexibility. Engineering companies, which we have a lot of in Houston, their business is project driven. And so they need the ability to grow. They need the ability to contract. They generally want some option to terminate or cancel at some period through the lease. And so it's a user-specific set of criteria that we deal with. We have to customize, much like you do, customize every search.
Sure.
Interesting.
Now, when when you're talking about a tenant who's going to be renting or leasing substantial space, there's always the option for that tenant to buy property and self-build. Why would they choose to lease instead of building?
A lot of reasons, and the list is probably 2 pages long, but I think first and foremost is you need to stay focused on your core business. If you're a public company, Wall Street doesn't really reward an oil and gas company for buying real estate. If they're generating, I'll say mid-20s rates of returns, and that's a guess, drilling oil and gas wells in certain parts of the country, they don't need to be going out and buying office buildings. The other part of it is just it's a function of tax and financial implications, functional obsolescence, risk in a market that's not their core business or not their area of expertise. You've got capital costs. Am I gonna put my capital into my business, or am I going to be renovating an office building 7 years from now because of changes in life safety and fire code?
Yeah, Lucian, let me ask you a couple of questions real quick. First of all, what's your website? I want to make sure we get that out before we're done.
It's www.joneslanglasalle.com.
And spell Lang.
L-A-N-G.
And LaSalle.
L-A-S-A-L-L-E.
Let me ask you also, you mentioned before we even began this segment that your business has been booming the last 2 years. Can you explain why?
I feel like God's really blessed me. I've been very fortunate. I think we're very fortunate to live in a city like Houston.
Yep.
The energy industry has really outperformed. I think Austin has done a good job of I guess, staying out of the way of business. I think we have a business-friendly climate here, and I think we have a really industrious workforce. You've got highly educated workers. You have people on the other end of the spectrum, but people who are willing to take the talents and resources they have and work hard, and you have everything in between. And I think when you get out of balance between the two, you have a hard time sustaining a well-balanced economy. And I think when you have economic engines like the oil and gas industry, the medical center, and the Port of Houston, you've got a really strong recipe for success.
Yeah, no question about it. Howard?
Yeah, just I want to back up 1 minute. I think I might understand it, but I'm not sure everybody else does. What does functional obsolescence mean in a practical sense?
Could mean a lot of different things. One thing that Houston struggles with, I think we talked about it briefly before we came in here, but a lot of our inventory is built in the 80s. And at that point in time, employee densities inside the workspace was a person for 300 feet or 3 employees for 1,000 feet roughly. Most of the garages were built to accommodate that level of density. As work environment standards have changed, densities have changed inside the space, and a lot of these companies, especially engineering companies, are trending toward higher density. Garages can't accommodate the parking density that a lot of these companies have.
Yeah.
That's one really expensive example of functional obsolescence.
Lucian, I want to tell you I appreciate you being a guest on our show today. I want to thank, of course, Howard Kahn. He is the Lone Star Lawyer at LoneStarLawyer.net. He's a regular contributor on the program, bringing great guests in and really kind of giving us an idea of what's happening out there in the business front. What I like about your guests is that there really is a real diversity of what you bring in, and it shows how connected you are with a lot of different types of businesses out there in the Houston area.
Well, thank you, Kevin, very much. I got to give some of the credit to my associate, Candy Cardona, who does work for me, and at her job, just as you get credit
She's
for
a
your
great
support
lady.
people.
Absolutely, I do. I try to avoid that as much as I can, but sometimes I have to in order to keep those. No, I'm just joking. But you're right, and she's a great lady. I love the questions she asked about your involvement in the show, and she's working very hard to make sure that we continue to grow that involvement because we love the work you're doing. The toll-free number for Howard Kahn, 888-575-5246, or you can check him out online at LoneStarLawyer.net, and I encourage you to do just that. Interesting stuff. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. Thank you, Lucian. That was great meeting you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
All right, when we come back, much more for you. I want to encourage you to stay tuned to it right here on The Price of Business.